When I think back to the day I met Alex, it feels like it was only yesterday. I was in a mom and pop dive looking to keep away from any and all takers. Sucking on their Rocca cheap coffee, getting straight inside my head, lost amid the chaos of thought, planlessness. That was when he came in, practically out of a film with no intense lighting or music. The ding on top of the door and smell of coffee adhesive fragments, covered up by his baby powder, ended after shave. "Is this seat taken?" He gestured to the chair across from me and smiled with a force that would kill you. "Looks free to me," I replied, trying to sound cool and not at all flustered by his sudden appearance. We started talking, and damn, it was like we were cut from the same cloth. He was into all the junk I was, from bench-watching the same trashy series to arguing about the best pizza topping. It's pineapple, fight me. Fast forward a bit, and we're dating, not just casual meetups, but the real deal. It felt like I'd known him my whole life, and before we knew it, we were talking about getting hitched. That's when the drama started. His parents, let me tell you, were something else. The first time I met them, it was like walking into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. They had this way of smiling while sizing you up, like they were deciding whether you were worth their time or not. "So you're the girl Alex can't stop yapping about," his mom said, her voice dripping with something that was definitely not warm. Guilty as charged, I shot back, trying not to let her see she got to me. They laid down the law pretty quick, telling us we needed to sign a prenup. Now, I ain't no gold digger, and I sure as hell don't need anyone's money, but that rubbed me the wrong way. "I'll sign your prenup," I told them, "but I've got one condition. If one of us cheats, the cheater pays up minus 100 grand. Alex looked like I'd slapped him with a fish. "Babe, I'd never cheat on you," he said, all wide-eyed and serious. Yeah, well, my ex said the same thing before I caught him with his pants down, literally. So it's this or nothing. He agreed, and his parents did too, though they looked like they'd swallowed lemons. We thought that was the end of it, but boy, were we wrong. One evening, we were cuddled up on the couch, a tradition we had started since moving in together. We had this old rickety couch that we swore we'd replace, but never did because somehow it had become our spot. The TV was on, but we weren't watching. We were too busy making plans for a trip to Italy we knew we couldn't afford, but were determined to make happen. "Alex, think about it. The food, the wine, the art. We have to go," I said, my eyes sparkling with excitement. Alex laughed, wrapping his arm tighter around me. "Emily, babe, you had me at food. But let's face it, our bank account is more camping in the backyard than a romantic getaway to Venice." I playfully nudged him. "So we'll save. We'll cut back on, I don't know, things we don't need, like your video games." He feigned horror. "Not the video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my beloved coffee maker, but leave the games alone." We laughed, but that was us, always dreaming big but grounded in the reality of our modest lives. We didn't care, we were happy. The happiness wasn't just in the big moments. It was in the little things too, like how Alex would make breakfast on Saturdays. He couldn't cook to save his life, but he'd somehow mastered the art of scrambled eggs and toast, which he'd served with a side of his terrible coffee. I love those mornings. "Hey, I'm thinking scrambled eggs today. What do you think?" He'd ask, already heading to the kitchen. "Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time," I'd call out, followed by, "and I'm making the coffee." One day, the topic we had been avoiding came up. We were doing dishes together, a mundane task that somehow felt special because we were doing it together. "Emily, we need to talk about, starting a family," Alex said, breaking the comfortable silence. I paused, a plate in hand. "I know, it's scary, isn't it? What if we can't? Alex turned to me, drying his hands on a towel. Then we'll deal with it together. But we won't know until we try, right? I mean, how hard can it be? I laughed, a mix of nerves and love. Famous last words, babe. But that's how it was with us. No matter what we were facing, we faced it together. Even when his mom started dropping not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren, every chance she got, we took it in stride. Emily, darling, when are you going to give me some grandbabies? You're not getting any younger, you know, she'd say, her voice sweet, but the message anything but. I bite my tongue, smile, and say, we're working on it, aren't we, Alex? And he'd jump in, yeah, Mom, lay off, will you? These things take time. But as the year went on, the pressure started to build, not just from his mom, but from within. We wanted a family, but it wasn't happening as easily as we had hoped. Ever since Judy found her new hobby of making my life a living hell, our home turned into a battleground, and the main weapon was her sharp tongue. It wasn't just about the occasional jibe anymore. It was an all-out war with daily assaults on my self-esteem and role as a wife. It all spiraled one Sunday lunch, a day that was supposed to be laid back and peaceful. Judy, with her uncanny timing, dropped by uninvited just as we were about to sit down. The air was tense the moment she walked in, her eyes scanning the room like she was about to conduct a military inspection. Well, isn't this quaint? She started, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she looked at the modest spread prepared. You really outdid yourself, Emily. I can see you've been slaving away in the kitchen all morning. Her eyes briefly met mine, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Trying to keep the peace, I forced a smile. It's nothing fancy, Judy, just something simple and quick. Please have a seat. As we sat down, the barrage began in earnest. You know, Emily, Judy said, loading her voice with condescension. I was talking to Mrs. Henderson the other day, and she mentioned how her grandson was just born. It got me thinking, what are you and Alex going to give me some good news? It's not like you're getting any younger. I felt my cheeks burn, a mix of embarrassment and anger. I glanced at Alex, hoping for some support, but he was suddenly very interested in his plate. Mom, come on, Alex finally muttered, but it was half-hearted, and we all knew it. Judy plowed on, relentless. And Alex, dear, I don't mean to be cruel, but you're not a charity. You work hard for your money. Why waste it on Emily if she can't do her basic duties as a wife? A cleaning service and a cook would be much more efficient, don't you think? That's when I couldn't hold back any longer. Judy, I am trying my best here. It's not like I don't want to have kids. And as for the house and my cooking, well, I didn't realize marriage was a service contract. Judy scoffed. Well, it's not a free ride either. You have responsibilities, Emily, which you are clearly not fulfilling. The room was heavy with tension, and I could feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes. But what hurt the most wasn't Judy's words. It was Alex's silence. He finally spoke up, but it wasn't to defend me. Yeah, Mom has a point. Maybe we should consider getting some help around here. It would make things easier for you, too. Easier for me? His words felt like a betrayal. It was clear I was on my own in this. Over the next few days, Judy's visits became more frequent, and with each visit, her criticism grew sharper. She'd inspect the house, pointing out every speck of dust or pillow out of place. You call this clean? She'd scoff. My eyes must be deceiving me because this looks like a pigsty. Then came the comments about my appearance. Is that what you're wearing? You know, a wife should dress to please her husband. It's no wonder Alex is always so tired. He has to come home to this. I tried to fight back. Judy, I don't dress for Alex. I dress for myself. And he's always so tired because he works hard, not because of what I wear. But it was like talking to a brick wall. Judy had made up her mind about me, and nothing I said or did would change it. Alex's stance, or lack thereof, was the biggest blow. Each night after his mom's departure, we'd argue. "Why won't you stand up for me, Alex? She's walking all over us, and you're just letting her." "Emily, she's old, set in her ways." "What do you want me to do? Kick my own mom out?" "No, but I want you to be my husband, to stand by me, not her." It was clear this was more than just about Judy's disapproval. It was about us, our marriage, and whether we were strong enough to stand together or let Judy's criticisms tear us apart. As the days turned into weeks, I realized this wasn't just a phase. It was a full-blown siege. If we didn't do something soon, there might not be anything left to save. Things between me and Alex had been icy since Judy ramped up her campaign of critique. But it wasn't just the home front that was feeling the strain. Alex himself had started acting weird, not in a "he's just stressed at work" kind of way. It was something else, something that made my stomach twist in knots. It started with the phone calls. Alex had always been pretty open about his phone. We didn't keep secrets from each other, but then he started stepping out of the room every time he got a call. And it was always the same caller ID, John Work. "Who's John Work?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my voice casual. Alex flinched, a telltale sign that he was on edge. "Oh, just a new guy at the office." "Lots of questions, you know," he said. But it didn't stop there. Alex, who was as far from a fashionista as you could get, suddenly started caring about his appearance. Gone were the days of graphic tees and worn-out jeans. Now it was all crisp shirts, slacks, and cologne. He was using cologne now. Since when did he care about smelling like a department store? What's with the new look? Alex got a job interview or something. I joked one morning, watching him comb his hair in a way I'd never seen before. He just smirked a little too quickly. Just felt like changing things up. No harm in that, right? And the late nights at work, they were becoming a regular thing. Another long one, babe, I texted, trying not to sound too needy. "Sorry, Em, this project is killing me." "Won't be late, I promise." He'd text back, but the clock would tick well past midnight before I heard his keys in the door. I tried to shake the feeling that something was off, but it clung to me like a shadow. That's when I decided to hire a private detective. It felt like something out of a bad TV show, but I had to know for sure. The evidence came in a plain brown envelope. The contents were as damning as they were heartbreaking. Photos of Alex with another woman, their intimacy undeniable, captured in frozen moments that shattered our years together. But it was the recording that cut the deepest. Their conversations, filled with endearments and plans, left no room for doubt. They were in love, or at least he was with her. I sat there, the evidence spread out in front of me, a cold realization settling in. This was it. This was the proof that could anchor me in a stormy divorce, should it come to that. Photos that caught moments stolen from our life together, and words that betrayed every "I love you" he had ever whispered in my ear. But I kept it all a secret, a painful burden I chose to carry alone. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed a plan, a way to navigate the wreckage of our marriage with my dignity intact. The following days were a blur. Alex continued his charade, and I played along, the perfect wife with a smile plastered on my face, and a heart breaking silently. Our conversations became a dance around the truth, each word measured, every laugh forced. "Everything okay, Em? You've been quiet," Alex would ask, his concerns seemingly genuine. "Yeah, just tired, you know." "Work's been crazy." I'd reply, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. It was just another mundane day, or so I thought, until I stumbled upon a conversation that would change everything. There I was, passing by the slightly ajar door to Alex's office, when their voices caught my attention. It was Alex and his mother, Judy, and they weren't just chit-chatting. The tone was serious, heavy with intent. "I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not just about the kids. I've lost all feeling for Emily. It's like we're roommates, not husband and wife." Alex's voice, strained and tired, floated through the gap. Judy's voice, ever so sharp, replied, "Well, of course you feel that way. She's not given you a child, and let's be honest, what else has she brought to this marriage but—" Let's not be hasty. My 70th birthday is coming up, and we wouldn't want to miss out on a generous gift from her now. Would we? The cynicism in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. They were plotting against me, using me until they deemed it convenient to throw me aside. And after we get a nice expensive gift, we can kick her to the curb, right? Alex said, his voice cold and calculating. "Exactly, dear." "Just bide your time a little longer," Judy confirmed, her voice dripping with malice. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a mix of shock and anger boiling inside me. They were planning my exit from this family as casually as one would plan a grocery list. The hurt was deep, but it sparked something else in me, a burning desire for revenge. They thought they could use me, discard me at their convenience. I'd show them. I wasn't just some pawn in their twisted game. A few days later, during a family dinner that felt more like a farce than a meal, Judy brought up her upcoming birthday with the same smirk that I had come to despise. She leaned in and asked, "So Emily, dear, what are you planning for my birthday? Something special, I hope." I met her gaze, my face a mask of calm. "Actually, Judy, I was thinking of throwing you a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. A night you won't forget." Her eyes lit up with greed, and she exchanged a quick, satisfied look with Alex. They thought they had me cornered, but little did they know I was already 2 steps ahead. "Oh, Emily, that sounds too delightful." "Just close family, keep it intimate," Judy said, her voice oozing fake sweetness. "Of course, Judy. It'll be our pleasure," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The weeks leading up to Judy's 70th birthday felt like a slow march towards D-Day. Every smirk from her, every indifferent shrug from Alex fueled my resolve. The plan was simple yet bold, just like in the movies. Host a lavish dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant under the guise of a loving gesture, then drop the bombshell. But like any good plot, the devil was in the details. The night before the party, the tension at home was palpable. Alex, oblivious to the storm brewing, was casually lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything set for tomorrow?" he asked, not looking up. "Oh, you could say that," I replied, my tone bellying the turmoil inside. The day arrived, and as guests started to fill the opulent dining room reserved for Judy's celebration, the air was thick with anticipation. My heart raced, not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of what was about to unfold. Judy, ever the queen bee, basked in the attention, lavishing in the luxury of her surroundings. "Oh, Emily, you've outdone yourself. This place is exquisite," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. As we all settled in, the meal proceeded with the kind of forced mirth that comes with such family gatherings. Laughs were shared, stories exchanged, and then, as the dessert plates were cleared away, the waiter approached with the final act of the evening, the bill. He leaned in discreetly, informing us the dinner cost $33,000. Without missing a beat, I handed over my card. The gesture went unnoticed by most. It was then Alex, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, decided to drop his bombshell. Emily, I think it's time everyone knew. I'm tired of this of us. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air, a toxic cloud that seemed to suffocate all other noise in the room. Before I could even process the full weight of his statement, Judy piped up, her voice sharp and unforgiving. Well then, since that's out in the open, I think it's best you leave, Emily. We're celebrating family tonight, and well, you're no longer part of it. The room went deadly silent. Every eye was on me, waiting to see how I'd crumble. But I didn't. With a calm I didn't feel, I stood, nodded, and walked out without a word. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I made my way home, the finality of everything that had happened washing over me in waves. By the time I reached his apartment, a plan had formed. I packed my essentials, the numbness giving way to a cold resolve. This was it, the end of one life and the start of another. As I zipped the last suitcase, my phone started buzzing, a relentless, insistent vibration that I initially ignored. Curiosity, however, got the better of me. Judy's voice screeched from the other end. Emily, the payment didn't go through. You need to fix this now. The sweet, sweet irony. In my preparations for the inevitable, I had secured my exit strategy. I had blocked the shared account, knowing it would be the first thing Alex would try to use against me. Oh, Judy, that's unfortunate. But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you've so eloquently put it, I'm afraid you'll have to sort this out yourself. Her outrage was palpable, even through the phone, but it was music to my ears. The chaos that unfolded was a fitting end to the farce my marriage had become. Reports came through the grapevine of the restaurant staff demanding payment of Judy's escalating tantrums, and eventually the arrival of the police to calm the storm she had become. In the end, it was Alex and his relatives who had to pull together the money to settle the bill, a poetic justice for the betrayal and humiliation they had subjected me to. The morning after the dinner disaster felt like waking up to the aftermath of a storm. I had my plan, my resolve, and a set of divorce papers in my hand as I made my way back to what used to be our shared home for the last time. The moment I stepped through the door, the air crackled with tension, thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex and Judy were there, looking like they'd been arguing. The sight of me seemed to unite them in hostility. You've got some nerve showing up here after last night, Alex spat out, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Judy, ever the viper, was quick to add her poison. Ungrateful wretch. You've embarrassed us in front of the whole city. Do you know how humiliating it was to have the police calm me down? People were laughing, filming. I met their fury with a calm I didn't feel. Embarrassed? You think that's your biggest problem right now? I tossed the divorce papers on the table, the photos of Alex's infidelity on top. You should be more concerned with this. The color drained from Alex's face as he picked up the photos, his mother peering over his shoulder. Their outrage turned to shock, then to panic as they realized the extent of what I had. And let's not forget the payout, shall we? I continued, my voice steady. You cheat, you pay $100,000 to be exact. Judy's face twisted into a snarl. You wouldn't dare. You can't do this to us. Oh, but I can and I will. My tone was cold final. Alex, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him, switched tactics. Please let's talk about this. We can fix it. I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and hard. Fix it? You think you can just undo everything with a few words. No, Alex, it's done. Judy, ever the manipulator, tried a softer approach, her voice dripping with false concern. Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. This will ruin us. That ship has sailed, Judy. You should have thought about that before. The begging turned to pleading, their words a desperate scramble to salvage what they could. But my mind was made up. I was done being the victim, done with their lies and manipulations. In the end, Alex had no choice but to borrow the money from his parents to pay me. As I left that house for the last time, check in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After everything went down, I used the payout from Alex to put a down payment on a small but cozy place of my own. It's funny, how much peace you can find in the walls of a place that's just yours, where every nook feels like a sanctuary from the chaos of the past. Life's quieter now, and I like it that way. I've got a job that keeps me busy, neighbors who nod and smile, and a little garden that's all mine to tend to. But every once in a while, the grapevine tosses a juicy bit my way about Alex and Judy. Just the other day, I was grabbing coffee from the corner spot where locals hang out, and I bumped into someone from the old neighborhood. After the usual pleasantries, they leaned in, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Hey, have you heard about the latest drama with your ex and his mom?" They asked, eyes gleaming with the thrill of gossip. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and detachment taking hold. Can't say that I have. Do tell. Well, they started, clearly savoring the moment. It seems Judy's not too pleased with Alex's new girlfriend. Word is, they've been at it like cats and dogs. Makes your situation look like a walk in the park. The conversation moved on, but as I walked away, coffee in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of utter relief. There was a time when news like that would have sent me spiraling, but now it was just another piece of someone else's story. These days, my biggest concern is whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or if I'll ever get the hang of yoga without looking like a newborn deer on ice. Life's simpler, quieter, and infinitely sweeter on this side of chaos.
I am Hillary, a 29-year-old. For me, who has led an ordinary life, my only pride was the presence of my best friend since school, Vanessa. During my job search, I was struggling to get job offers and felt down. "Would you like to work at my dad's company?" With that one phrase from Vanessa, my life changed significantly. Her father, Richard, is the chairman of a major beverage company. He hired me simply because I was her best friend. What made my life even more brilliant was meeting Michael, who was introduced to me by Vanessa. Michael was a kind person who listened seriously to even my trivial worries. "Hillary, will you marry me?" After dating for 6 months, I received a marriage proposal from Michael. I couldn't believe that such happiness could come to me, but it was real. We got married and started living together. The days I commuted with Michael in the morning filled me with excitement for our new life ahead. However, marrying an old man? You're just after his money, aren't you? I never thought that I would be addressed with such words by Michael. After 6 months of marriage, his attitude began to change. "What's for dinner today?" I began to notice the coldness in his voice. "I made beef and potatoes. I thought you'd be pleased since it's your favorite dish." Michael's response was indifferent, and he began eating in silence as soon as he sat at the dinner table. Gradually, his attitude worsened further. He became increasingly cold towards me. Moreover, he began to say that he couldn't see me as a woman. He started coming home late at night more frequently, and my distrust only grew. "Michael, you've been coming home late recently. Is everything okay?" "I'm just busy with work." "It's none of your business." His cold words left me speechless. At that moment, my heart shattered. I could feel my love for Michael cooling gradually. "I can't stand this anymore." It seemed that my murmur reached Michael's ears. "Did you say something?" I mustered my voice from the depths of my stomach. "I can't stand this anymore." I want a divorce. The moment those words came out of my mouth, the room seemed to freeze. Michael's face twisted in surprise and anger. What? Are you sane? I'm sane. If anything, I wasn't sane before. Every day, I've been watching your mood and suppressing my feelings. I'm at my limit. My voice trembled. But I didn't look away and stared at Michael. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Then, he suddenly smirked coldly. What will you have left if we divorce? You're currently living above the average with your husband's earnings. Are you dissatisfied with that situation? I'm not saying that at all. Just what? Men have to work hard outside. I couldn't find any words to return to Michael's. His words were cold and piercing. That's fine. Freedom is more important than money. Freedom? Don't make me laugh. Do you think you can live on your own? Michael's words brought a surge of anxiety. Indeed, I didn't know what awaited me in life from now on. But I couldn't go back. I can live. I've lived by my own strength until now, and I will from now on. You think you're some kind of tragic heroine? Michael looked down on me with pity. Are you really thinking of getting a divorce? You'll regret it. I won't regret it. Staying together would be more regrettable. At my words, Michael's expression changed. It seemed a mix of anger and surprise. Fine. If you want a divorce, I'll let you have it. But be prepared. Your life will become hell. Those words sent a chill down my spine. But I had already decided. That's fine. My current life is hell. Michael started to say something but left the room without uttering a word. The door closed violently. Left alone in the room, I sat huddled up. Tears flowed, but strangely, my heart felt lighter. I felt from the bottom of my heart that this was the right choice. Life ahead will surely be a series of difficulties, but I can live by my own will. That alone seemed to give me hope. It's okay. I can become strong. I reassured myself as I resolved to take a step toward a new life. A month after the divorce from Michael, I began a new life at my parents' house. Waking up in the morning, I opened my eyes in my old room. The morning sun streaming through the window seemed to bless my new life. After the divorce, I strangely felt at ease. Every day, I no longer had to guess someone's mood and felt the joy of living as myself. During this time, a new encounter came my way. One day, a colleague, George, spoke to me with concern. Hillary, I heard you recently got divorced. Are you okay? George's kind voice surprised me a bit. Since joining the company, we have been colleagues and comrades, always striving to outdo each other. Thank you, George. I've been going through a lot. Is that so? How about a change of pace and going out for a drink together? I nodded to his invitation. When we arrived at the pub, George listened quietly to my story. It had been really tough after the divorce. Living at my parents' house had stabilized my mood. George smiled kindly at my words. That's good to hear. I'm glad to see you happy, Hillary. His words warmed my heart. Thank you, George, for listening. I'm always here to talk. I felt my cheeks warm slightly at his words. After that, George and I started to interact more outside of work. One day, George confided his own worries to me. Actually, I've been having some troubles too. What? You, George? I was surprised, and he smiled shyly. Yes. Actually, my father is the chairman of the company. I couldn't hide my surprise. I had never imagined that George was the son of such a big company's chairman. But please don't tell anyone. I want to be recognized for my own abilities. I nodded at his serious expression. Of course, I won't tell anyone. But that must be a lot of pressure, right? Yes, it is. Sometimes I feel suffocated trying to meet my father's expectations. I understood George's suffering. I remembered the pressure I had felt during my marriage with Michael. George, I've felt similar feelings. So, I think I understand. George looked a bit surprised at my words, but soon smiled kindly. Thank you, Hillary. It really helps to have you around. From then on, we began to consult each other about our troubles. George became more than just a colleague. He became a support for my heart. Gradually, George and I grew closer. Every time I encountered his kindness and seriousness, I felt my feelings for him deepening. One day, George asked me out on a date. Hillary, would you like to go out with me this weekend? A date? I asked, surprised. George nodded shyly, saying, yes, a date. What do you think? My heart raced at his words. Of course, I'll go. That weekend, we watched a movie and enjoyed a meal at a nice restaurant. The time I spent with him was truly happy, and my heart felt warm. I really enjoyed today, Hillary. Me too, George. Thank you. On the way home, George gently took my hand. His warmth further warmed my heart. Hillary, I love you. His words filled me with surprise and joy. I love you too, George. As we confirmed our feelings for each other, we naturally kissed. At that moment, all my worries disappeared, and I was filled with happiness. After 6 months of dating, we continued to deepen our understanding of each other. George's kindness, his seriousness, and sharing his worries all made our bond stronger. Then, one day, George proposed to me. We got married without any problems and started a new life together. Being with George made me truly feel happy. Thank you, George. Let's keep working hard together. Yes, Hillary. We'll always be together. We held hands and began walking towards our future. Marriage with George brought me new hope and happiness. I also discussed my relationship with George with my best friend, Vanessa. It seems Vanessa also felt responsible for my divorce from Michael. I'm sorry, I thought Michael would be okay. Don't worry. Thanks to that, I met George. Oh, that's good. How about we have dinner together sometime? Vanessa and George agreed to my suggestion. When we spent time together, we found unexpected commonalities. Vanessa and George's fathers were important figures in their company. Therefore, they shared the children's conflicts. I get it. It's like pressure, right? Yeah. But I want to be recognized for who I am. I was happy that my best friend and my partner, now my husband, got along well. You know, they say love doesn't work out if those around you don't agree. I felt comfortable in a relationship where I could consult them about anything. 6 months into my marriage with George, a very happy piece of news arrived. Hey, George. We've received a wedding invitation from Vanessa. Really? That's wonderful. Let's go, Hillary. His kind smile made me nod a little nervously. On the day of the wedding, we stepped into the vibrant venue. A bit of nervousness surged as it had been a while since we all met due to our busy work schedules. Hillary. Thank you for coming. Vanessa ran up to me happily. Behind her was a familiar face. Hillary, long time no see. Vanessa's father, Richard, is the man who helped me with my job search. Richard, it's been a while. Thank you for your help during my job search. Don't mention it, it was all thanks to your own abilities, Hillary. And Richard's words were interrupted because someone else approached. Hey, Richard. Long time no see. Surprisingly, it was George's father, who is the chairman of my company. As I explained earlier, Richard and George's father have been comrades since the old days. Nice to meet you again, Hillary. Please take good care of my son. I responded with a smile, albeit feeling a bit overwhelmed, to George's father's words. From there, the three of us engaged in light conversation. We celebrated Vanessa's wedding and reminisced about old times. There was a happy atmosphere. However, that happiness did not last long. Hey, if it isn't Hillary. A familiar voice made my body freeze. When I turned around, there stood Michael. Michael. Well, marrying an old man? You're just after his money, aren't you? I was at a loss for words. It seemed Michael misunderstood that I had remarried Richard. What are you talking about? I am. That's fine. I'm producing results at work. You must regret your divorce, right? To think you'd marry an old man for his inheritance, you sure have changed your taste. Michael's provocative attitude angered me. However, this was a wedding venue. I couldn't raise my voice. Michael, that's all in the past. I am. Hey, old man. I work at a well-known beverage company. You know that, right? Michael started to take a confrontational stance towards Richard. Michael works at a fairly large company and seemed to want to flaunt his position. But then it happened. What? Who do you think this couple is? Tony exclaimed in a panic. Huh? Michael's expression froze. This man is the chairman of a major beverage company. The color drained from Michael's face. The beverage company I work for, mentioned by a guest from the groom's side, far surpasses the size of the company Michael works for. No way. Michael's voice trembled. That was when, as if to save me, George appeared from behind. Michael. George said quietly, yet forcefully. Hillary is my wife. Whatever her past, I will protect her now. George's words warmed my heart. Michael. Now Richard spoke up. Your company and ours have had dealings, haven't we? Unfortunately, as of today, those dealings will end. Huh? Wait, please. Michael was flustered. Just kidding. Was that not a business joke? Really, don't young people understand a business joke these days? Richard laughed as if teasing Michael. A joke, huh? That's a relief. The workplace you work at has been an important business partner I've worked with for many years. There's no way I could actually terminate a contract with such a workplace. Richard's words visibly relieved Michael. But Richard took a deep breath. I can't guarantee your future. Do you understand what that means? Excuse me? If you don't understand, let me tell you. You're fired. Such language towards the chairman of a major business partner, how appropriate is that? George was trembling with tension. I'm very sorry. Having an employee like you is a nuisance to us. I'll inform your company later. You're to be dismissed for misconduct. Dismissed for misconduct, that's too much. I just misunderstood. Misunderstanding, huh? Then, let's consider your dismissal my misunderstanding. Richard had already turned his back. Please wait, I'm truly sorry. Michael repeatedly apologized. Michael. Richard's low voice echoed through the area. A businessman sometimes has to be stubborn. Your dismissal is unavoidable. Because I am stubborn. Come on, Hillary, George. The ceremony is about to start. At Richard's words, we nodded. Leaving Michael behind, we headed to the ceremony hall. Watching Vanessa's happy figure, I savored my own happiness. Holding George's warm hand, I felt hopeful about the life ahead. The past with Michael was indeed painful. But it was overcoming that which made my present happiness possible. Thinking this, my heart strangely lightened. Hillary, are you okay? George asked with concern. Yes, I'm fine. In fact, I'm very happy. At my words, George smiled kindly. At that moment, I was certain. The past was just that, the past. From now on, I would build a new future with George. However, the day after Vanessa's wedding, an incident occurred. The day after Vanessa's wedding, I was enjoying a peaceful day off. George and I were planning to watch the continuation of last night's drama. As I relaxed in the living room, suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. Who could it be? I wondered, tilting my head. George peeked out from the kitchen. I'll get it. As George was heading to the door, another fierce knock sounded. When he opened the door, an unexpected person was standing there. You. George's voice made me stand up in surprise. Michael was panting and his face was red as if he had been running. You guys really did it now. Michael yelled. George responded calmly. Michael, please calm down. What happened? Calm down? You've ruined my life. I stood behind George, staring at Michael. Michael, how did you find this place? I looked up your address from the guest list at the venue. I can't just sit back and accept what you've done to me. George said calmly. You've illegally obtained personal information. That's a criminal act. Michael ignored his words and yelled at me. You sabotaged me because you didn't like our divorce. I responded calmly. That's not true. We haven't done anything. Lies. You must have said something to the chairman. George continued to handle the situation calmly. Michael, your actions are the cause. We haven't done anything. However, Michael wasn't listening. Because of you, I'm being punished. Show some sincerity. I looked at Michael sympathetically. That might be difficult, but we don't know anything about it. Michael's anger intensified. I don't want your sympathy. And this George guy, does he really care about you, Hillary? George furrowed his brows. What do you mean? I saw you. You were walking with another woman. George answered calmly. That's a misunderstanding. I haven't been out with any woman other than Hillary. I agreed. George wouldn't do such a thing. I believe him. Michael grew even more furious. Are you still lying? After ruining my life, you dare to look happy. George said firmly. Michael, please leave. If you stay here any longer, we'll have to call the police. Michael flinched for a moment but quickly regained his anger. The police? Are you really going to go that far? I said kindly. Michael, please leave. Staying here won't change anything. Michael gritted his teeth and glared at us. You guys are a plague. Damn you. George had been silently listening to Michael's words, but gradually his expression hardened. Especially when he heard the words insulting me. I could see the flames of anger in George's eyes. That was when George suddenly took out his smartphone from his pocket. Michael looked puzzled by his action. Michael, I've reached my limit with your behavior. George's voice was cold and quiet. What's that smartphone for? Michael seemed a bit uneasy as he asked. George manipulated the screen and pressed the play button. Then, Michael's shouting voice from earlier started playing. This is. The color drained from Michael's face. The moment you appeared at the door, I had been recording this conversation. George explained calmly. I was surprised and looked at George. I hadn't thought he had anticipated things this far. Why would you do that? Michael's voice trembled. Because I anticipated your actions. And my prediction was correct. George answered plainly. Michael was at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing. Michael, please listen. George continued with a serious expression. This recording contains evidence of threats against us, misuse of personal information, and insults towards Hillary. So, what about it? Michael blustered, his voice clearly shaky. I intend to hand this recording over to the company chairman. George's words turned Michael's face pale. Stop it. If you do that, I'll be. Your position at the company will become precarious, right? In fact, it will be more than precarious. You'll have nowhere to go. George stated calmly. Michael was speechless, left standing there. Michael. George stepped forward. I might have forgiven you if it was just an insult to me. However, I will never forgive the insults towards Hillary. I felt warmth in my chest at George's words. George. I murmured involuntarily. Hillary is very important to me. Hurting her is something I cannot forgive more than hurting myself. There was strong determination in George's voice. Michael was completely devastated, his face pale. Please, delete that recording. Michael pleaded with a trembling voice. George seemed to think for a moment, but then appeared to make a decision. There is one condition. Anything, just tell me. Michael was desperate. First, you must sincerely apologize to Hillary. And, you must never come near us again. Michael hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Okay. I'm sorry. Hillary, I was wrong. And I won't ever come near you two again. I promise. George listened to Michael's words and slowly nodded. Understood. Please keep your promise. If you break this promise, I will immediately call the police. Michael seemed startled by the mention of the police. Okay, understood. You'll delete the recording, right? At Michael's words, George smirked. I never promised to delete the recording. This evidence will be handed over to the chairman. Why are you doing this? That's not what you promised. Don't you understand what you've done? You were disrespectful to the chairman. It doesn't matter whether the chairman is my father or not. Such language is unacceptable towards a business partner. I didn't know that. Being unaware doesn't solve everything. As a professional, you should know that, shouldn't you? Michael had nothing to say in response to George's words. Furthermore, the theft of personal information, threats, and insults. As for your punishment, I cannot say anything. But please take the consequences seriously. Everything is the result of your own actions. The cause lies within you. At George's words, Michael collapsed to his knees. Please leave immediately. Otherwise, I will call the police. Michael, please go home. Staying here won't change anything. Michael gritted his teeth and glared at us. Damn it, it's all because of you. George said calmly. Michael, your life is for you to decide. Blaming us won't change anything. Michael started to say something but choked up. Then, suddenly, tears welled up in his eyes. Why are you guys the only ones happy? I said sympathetically. Michael, happiness is something you have to seize for yourself. Hating us won't change anything. Michael glared at us one last time and said, "Remember this," before he left. When the door closed, George and I let out a deep sigh. "Are you okay?" George placed his hand on my shoulder. "Yes, I'm okay." "I'm really glad you're here, George." George smiled gently. "We haven't done anything wrong. He will realize that eventually." I nodded. "That's true. But I'm a bit worried about him." "Me too. But his life is for him to decide." We looked at each other and hugged quietly. Michael's visit was unexpected, but it seemed to strengthen our bond. Now, let's watch the continuation of last night's drama. That's right. I had completely forgotten. We held hands and headed to the living room. Overcoming this trial seemed to deepen our love. A few days after the wedding, Michael received an urgent summons from his boss at the company. Unable to suppress his anxiety, he headed to the conference room. When he opened the door, not only his boss but also the president and directors, including the chairman, awaited him with stern expressions. "What have you done?" Suddenly, the boss's roar echoed through the conference room. Michael tried to explain with a trembling voice, but his excuses were futile. Silence. "What were you thinking? Our transactions were about to be abruptly terminated because of you. You took our company for granted." The president interrogated him harshly. "I hear you were rude to the chairman of a business partner at the wedding venue?" Michael turned pale and tried desperately to explain. "No, that wasn't my intention. I don't want to hear excuses. Furthermore, you threatened and insulted the chairman's son and his wife. Plus, you stole personal information from the venue. These are serious criminal acts that affect our company's reputation. Your thoughtless actions almost caused substantial damage to our company." The chairman's voice filled with anger, and Michael was completely lost for words. Dismissed for misconduct. That's final. Upon hearing those words, Michael suddenly fell to his knees. "I'm very sorry. Please, give me another chance." He began to plead tearfully. However, the director's cold gazes did not change. Michael's demeanor was completely different from when he had been arrogant towards me. His life had changed drastically in just one day. Meanwhile, my life with George was filled with happiness. The day after the wedding, we were enjoying breakfast together. "George, what shall we do today?" The weather is nice, how about we go for a walk?" I nodded with a big smile at George's suggestion. We held hands and headed to a nearby park. In the park, children's laughter filled the air, and flowers bloomed beautifully. "George, look. That flower is beautiful." "Indeed. Your smile is just as beautiful." Blushing, I smiled at George's words. Then, we sat on a bench and enjoyed a leisurely time. "George, I'm really happy. I'm so glad to be with you." "Me too, Hillary. Every day becomes special because I'm with you." I rested my head on George's shoulder. There was an unspoken flow of love and trust between us. In the afternoon, we enjoyed cooking together. George handled the knife while I prepared the ingredients. Laughter never ceased in the kitchen. "George, that's not how you cut it. Like this." "Thank you, Hillary. I'm still learning how to cook." We laughed together. When dinner was ready, we sat down facing each other. "Let's eat. Looks delicious." As we enjoyed the meal, we discussed our future dreams and plans. The painful memories of the past had faded from my mind. Now, I was only looking at a happy future with George. In the evening, we sat on the sofa and enjoyed a movie. George held me gently, and I felt a profound sense of peace wrapped in his warmth. George, thank you. Really, thank you. Hillary, thank you too. Being with you is my greatest happiness. With tears in my eyes, I smiled. Our love for each other would continue to grow. A blissful everyday life enveloped us both.
The sound of shattering glass jolted me from my thoughts. I rushed to the kitchen, my heart pounding, to find Alex standing over a broken vase, his face twisted in frustration. "Damn it, Laura, why'd you put this here?" he snapped, gesturing at the shards scattered across the floor. I bit back a retort. The vase had been in the same spot for years. "I'm sorry, dear. I'll clean it up." As I knelt to gather the pieces, Alex huffed and stormed out of the room. I heard the front door slam moments later. So much for our quiet Sunday afternoon. I sighed, dumping the broken glass into the trash. My phone buzzed, and I saw a text from my father-in-law, Victor. "Laura, can you come by? Need to talk. Important." Curiosity piqued. I grabbed my keys and headed out. Victor was waiting on the porch when I arrived, his usually jovial face creased with worry. "Laura, thank goodness you're here," he said, ushering me inside. "Is Alex with you?" I shook my head. "He went out. What's wrong, Victor?" He led me to the living room, where we sat on the floral-patterned couch. "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise to keep it between us." "Of course," I said, concern growing. "What is it?" Victor took a deep breath. "I went to the doctor last week. The results, they're not good, Laura. I have cancer, stage 4. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Oh, Victor," I whispered, reaching for his hand. "I'm so sorry. Does Judith know?" He shook his head. "No, and I don't want her to. Not yet. You know how she gets." I did know. My mother-in-law's overbearing nature would only make things worse. "But Alex." "Not Alex either," Victor said firmly. "Please, Laura, I need time to process this myself before I deal with their reactions." I nodded, though keeping such a secret felt wrong. "What can I do to help?" "Just be here," he said, squeezing my hand. "I may need someone to talk to, someone who won't fuss or panic." "Of course," I promised. "Anything you need." As if on cue, we heard the front door open. Judith's voice rang out. "Victor, are you home?" Victor's eyes widened in panic. I squeezed his hand reassuringly before calling out, "In here, Judith. Just stopped by for a quick hello." Judith appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "Laura, what a surprise." I stood, forcing a smile. "I was just leaving, actually. Thanks for the chat, Victor." As I moved to leave, Judith's hand on my arm stopped me. "Before you go, dear, have you given any thought to what we discussed? About the summer house?" I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" "The inheritance, dear," Judith said, her voice sickly sweet. "Victor and I aren't getting any younger, you know. It's important to have these things sorted out." I glanced at Victor, who looked uncomfortable. "I don't think now's the time." "Nonsense," Judith interrupted. "It's never too early to plan. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings later on." The implication in her words made my skin crawl. I forced another smile. "Of course not, but I really must be going." As I drove home, my mind raced. Victor's illness, Judith's thinly veiled greed, Alex's indifference, it was all too much. I pulled into our driveway, steeling myself for whatever mood Alex might be in. The house was quiet when I entered. I found Alex in his study, engrossed in something on his computer. "Hey," I said softly, "everything okay?" He barely glanced up. "Fine. Where were you?" "Just visiting your parents," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Your dad seemed off." Alex shrugged. "Probably just tired. Did Mom say anything about the will?" His casual tone sent a chill down my spine. "The will? Why would she?" "No reason," he said quickly. "Just curious." As I left the room, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Something was very wrong in this family, and I was caught right in the middle of it. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed. Alex had already left for work, not bothering to say goodbye. I sighed, pushing away the hurt. There were more pressing matters to attend to. I arrived at Victor's house just after 9, armed with homemade soup and a forced smile. Judith answered the door, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Laura, what are you doing here?" I held up the soup container. "I thought I'd bring something over for Victor. He mentioned not feeling well yesterday." Judith's lips thinned. "How thoughtful. I'm sure he'll appreciate it, though. He's resting now." As she spoke, Victor appeared behind her. "Is that Laura? Come in, dear." Judith's scowl deepened, but she stepped aside. I followed Victor to the living room, feeling Judith's eyes boring into my back. "How are you feeling?" I asked softly once we were seated. Victor glanced towards the kitchen where Judith had disappeared. "Not great," he admitted. "The pain's getting worse." My heart ached. "Have you considered telling them? They should know, Victor." He shook his head firmly. "Not yet. Judith would smother me. And Alex." He trailed off, a look of disappointment crossing his face. I understood. Alex's indifference towards his father was painfully obvious. "At least let me help more," I pleaded. "I could drive you to appointments, bring meals." "What appointments?" Judith's sharp voice cut through the room. We both jumped, not having heard her approach. Victor recovered first. "Just a checkup, dear, nothing to worry about." Judith's eyes darted between us, suspicion clear. "I see. And Laura's going to drive you, is she? How convenient." The accusation in her tone made my cheeks burn. "I just offered to help." "I'm sure you did," Judith interrupted. "You're always so helpful, aren't you, Laura? Especially when it comes to my husband." I gaped at her, shocked by the implication. Victor stood abruptly. "That's enough, Judith. Laura's family." Judith's laugh was cold. "Family? Please. She's after something, mark my words." "The only one after something is you," I snapped, my patience finally breaking. "All you care about is what you might inherit." The room fell silent. Judith's face turned an alarming shade of red. "How dare you? I think you should leave," Victor said quietly. It took me a moment to realize he was talking to me. Hurt and anger warred within me as I gathered my things. As I reached the door, I heard Judith's triumphant voice. "I always knew she was trouble, Victor. It's about time you saw it, too." I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision. How had things gone so wrong? I was only trying to help, to honor Victor's wishes. Now I'd been all but banned from the house. When I arrived home, I was surprised to find Alex's car in the driveway. I found him in the kitchen, rifling through drawers. "You're home early," I said cautiously. He barely glanced up. "Looking for Dad's old business papers. Mom called, said I should check on some investments." My blood ran cold. "Investments? What are you talking about?" Alex sighed impatiently. "The family trust, Laura. Dad's not getting any younger, and we need to make sure everything's in order." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your father isn't even dead, and you're already divvying up his assets?" "Don't be dramatic," Alex scoffed. "It's just good planning, not that you'd understand." The casual cruelty of his words stung. "You should be more concerned about your father's health than his money," I said, my voice shaking. Alex finally looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean? Do you know something?" I hesitated, torn between keeping Victor's secret and exposing the truth. Before I could decide, Alex's phone rang. He answered, turning away from me. "Mom? Yeah, I'm looking now. Don't worry, we'll figure it out." As he spoke, a realization hit me like a thunderbolt. Alex and Judith were in this together, plotting behind Victor's back, and I was the only one who could stop them. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. For days, I'd been trying to reach Victor, but my calls went unanswered. Even my attempts to visit were thwarted by Judith's icy presence at the door. "He's resting," she'd say, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed triumph. Best not to disturb him. On the 5th day, I decided enough was enough. I drove to their house, determined to see Victor no matter what. But as I pulled up, I saw an ambulance in the driveway, its lights flashing silently. My heart pounding, I rushed to the front door. It swung open before I could knock, revealing Alex's ashen face. "What happened?" I demanded, pushing past him. "Dad's gone," Alex said, his voice hollow. He passed in his sleep. The world tilted beneath my feet. "No," I whispered, "that's impossible. I just spoke to him last week. He was fine." Alex's eyes narrowed. "Was he? You seemed awfully concerned about his health lately. What did you know, Laura?" Before I could respond, Judith appeared, her face a mask of grief. But there was something in her eyes, a calculating gleam that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Laura," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "If only you'd been here. Victor asked for you, you know, right at the end." The accusation in her words was clear. I felt my cheeks burn with anger and guilt. "I tried to come," I said. "You wouldn't let me in." Now, Judith soothed, patting my arm. "There's no need for hysteria. What's done is done." As the paramedics wheeled Victor's body out, covered in a sheet, I felt a piece of my heart break. I'd failed him. I should have told Alex and Judith about his illness, should have insisted on being there. "We'll need to start planning the funeral," Alex said, his voice oddly detached. "Mom and I were thinking you could handle the arrangements, Laura. You're good at that sort of thing." I stared at him, incredulous. "You want me to plan the funeral? For your father?" Judith nodded, her eyes glittering. "It's the least you could do, dear. After all, you weren't here when he needed you most." The unfairness of it all threatened to choke me, but as I looked at their expectant faces, a sudden clarity washed over me. They were setting me up, using me as a scapegoat for their own neglect. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll take care of everything." As I turned to leave, I heard Judith murmur to Alex, "Make sure she doesn't go overboard. We don't want to deplete the estate unnecessarily." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears of rage. How could they be so callous, so focused on money when Victor had just died? Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by funeral brochures and to-do lists. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying every interaction with Victor over the past weeks. Something wasn't right. Victor had been ill, yes, but not on death's door. And the way Alex and Judith were acting, it was all wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Don't forget to pick up Dad's suits from the dry cleaner, and make sure you get itemized receipts for everything." I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. They weren't grieving. They were covering their tracks. As I sat there, a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. What if Victor's death wasn't natural? What if Alex and Judith had... No, I couldn't even think it. But the pieces were falling into place, painting a picture too horrifying to contemplate. I looked at the funeral plans spread before me and made a decision. I would play along for now, but I would find out the truth about Victor's death, no matter what it cost me. And if my suspicions were correct, I would make sure Alex and Judith paid for what they'd done. The day of Victor's funeral dawned gray and somber, matching my mood perfectly. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black dress, my mind racing with suspicions and half-formed plans. I had to find out the truth. But how? At the church, I watched as mourners filed in, their faces a mix of grief and curiosity. I'd planned everything meticulously, just as Alex and Judith had demanded, but I had a few surprises in store. As I took my seat in the front pew, I felt Alex's hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Laura," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "Dad would have appreciated it." I fought the urge to shrug off his touch. "I'm sure he would have," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. The service began, a parade of hollow eulogies from people who barely knew Victor. When it was Alex's turn to speak, I steeled myself for more lies. "My father was a great man," Alex began, his voice thick with fake emotion. "He always put family first and taught me the value of hard work and perseverance." I almost laughed out loud. Alex had never worked hard a day in his life, and the only thing he'd inherited from Victor was his money. But then, Alex's speech took an unexpected turn. In fact, just before he passed, Dad and I had a long talk about the future of our family business. He was so excited about the new direction we were planning to take it. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding. What was Alex talking about? Victor had never mentioned any business plans to me. "Of course," Alex continued, his eyes darting to Judith. "Mom was instrumental in helping us make these decisions. She always knew what was best for Dad." A murmur rippled through the congregation. I glanced at Judith, who was nodding along, a small smile playing on her lips. Suddenly a voice rang out from the back of the church. "That's not true." All heads turned to see Victor's old business partner, Frank, standing up. Victor never wanted to change the business. He told me just last week he was thinking of selling it and retiring. The church erupted in whispers. Alex's face turned pale, while Judith's eyes blazed with fury. "How dare you?" she hissed at Frank. "This is a funeral, not a business meeting." But Frank wasn't finished. "And what's this about Judith being involved?" Victor always said she had no head for business. He wouldn't have let her anywhere near those decisions. I watched in stunned silence as chaos unfolded. Alex stumbled through the rest of his speech, sweat beading on his forehead. Judith sat rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. As we filed out of the church, I overheard Alex and Judith arguing in hushed tones. "How could you be so stupid?" Judith snapped. "Mentioning the business like that. Now everyone will be asking questions." "I was trying to establish our claim," Alex shot back. "How was I supposed to know that old fool Frank would be here?" "We need to be more careful," Judith warned. "If anyone starts digging—" Their voices faded as they moved away, but I'd heard enough. My suspicions were confirmed. They were hiding something, and it had to do with Victor's death and the family business. As I walked to my car, my mind was made up. I couldn't confront them directly. Not yet. I needed proof, and I knew just where to start looking. I pulled out my phone and dialed Frank's number. "Hello, Frank. It's Laura. We need to talk about Victor. There's something not right about all this, and I think you can help me figure out what." As I hung up, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I was stepping into dangerous territory, but for Victor's sake, I had to uncover the truth. Whatever Alex and Judith were hiding, I was going to find out. And when I did, they would pay for what they'd done. The days following Victor's funeral were a blur of forced smiles and barely concealed tension. I played my part, the dutiful daughter-in-law, while secretly meeting with Frank to unravel the mystery surrounding Victor's death and the family business. One evening, as I was sorting through Victor's belongings, a task Alex had conveniently delegated to me, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his old desk. My heart raced as I carefully extracted a small leather-bound journal. As I flipped through the pages, Victor's familiar handwriting revealed a shocking truth. He had suspected Alex and Judith of embezzling funds from the company for months. The last entry, dated just days before his death, sent chills down my spine. I confronted Alex today. He denied everything, but I saw the guilt in his eyes. "I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to change my will. I can't let them get away with this." My hands shook as I closed the journal. Victor had known. He was going to expose them, and they... No, I couldn't let myself think it. But the evidence was mounting. Lost in thought, I didn't hear the front door open. Alex's voice startled me back to reality. "Laura, what are you doing in here?" I quickly shoved the journal into my bag. "Just sorting through some papers like you asked." Alex's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Find anything interesting?" "No," I lied smoothly. "Just old receipts and documents." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Well, don't spend all night on it. Mom's coming over for dinner to discuss the reading of Dad's will." My stomach churned at the thought of sitting across from them, knowing what I now knew, but I had to keep up appearances. "Of course. I'll start dinner soon." As Alex left the room, I let out a shaky breath. I needed to act fast, but I had to be careful. One wrong move, and I could lose everything, including my life. During dinner, I watched Alex and Judith closely, noting their shared glances and cryptic comments about the will. I played my part, nodding and smiling at the appropriate moments, all while my mind raced with plans. As Judith was leaving, I overheard her whisper to Alex, "Make sure she doesn't suspect anything. We're too close to let it all fall apart now." That night, unable to sleep, I slipped out of bed and made my way to Alex's study. With trembling hands, I booted up his computer. Thanks to years of his carelessness, I knew his password. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails between Alex and Judith discussing not just the embezzlement but plans to take care of Victor if he became a problem. The last email, sent the day before Victor's death, simply read, "It's done. No loose ends." I stifled a gasp, my mind reeling. They had actually done it. They had killed Victor to cover up their crimes. As I was about to log off, a new email notification popped up. It was from Judith. The lawyer called. "We'll reading tomorrow at 2 p.m. Make sure Laura doesn't attend. We can't risk her finding out about the changes Victor made." My heart pounded in my chest. They were planning to cut me out completely to ensure their secret remained safe. In that moment, staring at the damning evidence on the screen, I made my decision. I couldn't confront them directly. It was too dangerous. But I couldn't let them get away with this either. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. "Detective Johnson, this is Laura Matthews. I need to report a murder." As I hung up, a mix of fear and determination washed over me. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, at the will reading, everything would change, and I would be ready. My heart pounded as I entered the lawyer's office, Victor's journal and a small recording device hidden in my purse. Alex and Judith were already there, their faces masks of false grief. The lawyer, Mr. Simmons, nodded gravely as I took my seat. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm glad you could join us," he said, his eyes flickering to Alex and Judith. "Shall we begin?" Alex cleared his throat. "Actually, I don't think Laura needs to be here for this. It's a family matter after all." I felt a surge of anger. "I am family, Alex. I was Victor's daughter-in-law for 20 years. Before Alex could argue, Mr. Simmons intervened. "Mr. Matthews, your father specifically requested Mrs. Matthews' presence for the reading of the will." I saw a flash of panic cross Alex and Judith's faces. This wasn't part of their plan. Mr. Simmons began reading the will, and with each word, the tension in the room grew thicker. Victor had left the bulk of his estate to charity, with only a small portion going to Alex and Judith. But the real bombshell came at the end. "And to my dear daughter-in-law, Laura," Mr. Simmons read, "I leave my personal effects and the contents of my private safe, including all documents pertaining to the family business." The room exploded into chaos. Judith leapt to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "This is preposterous. She has no right." Alex grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. "What did you do?" he hissed. "What lies did you tell my father?" I wrenched my arm free, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I didn't tell him anything, Alex, but maybe you should explain what you and your mother have been up to." Mr. Simmons looked bewildered. "I'm not sure I understand." "Oh, I think you will," I said, pulling out Victor's journal and the recording device. "I have evidence of embezzlement and worse." Alex lunged for the journal, but I was quicker. I pressed play on the recording device, and his own voice filled the room. "Mom, it's done. Dad won't be a problem anymore. Make sure you destroy all the evidence of the transfers." The color drained from Alex and Judith's faces. Mr. Simmons stood, his expression a mix of shock and disgust. "I think I need to call the authorities." What happened next was a blur. Alex made a desperate grab for the evidence, knocking over a lamp in the process. In the chaos, Judith slipped out of the room. I clutched Victor's journal to my chest, backing away from Alex's advancing form. "You don't understand," he snarled, his eyes wild. "We had no choice. Dad was going to ruin everything." "By exposing your crimes?" I shot back. "You killed him, Alex. Your own father." Suddenly, the door burst open. Detective Johnson, whom I'd called the night before, entered with 2 uniformed officers. "Alexander Matthews, Judith Matthews, you're under arrest for the murder of Victor Matthews and embezzlement." As the officers handcuffed a stunned Alex, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was over. Justice for Victor was finally within reach, but my relief was short-lived. As they led Alex away, he turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over, Laura. You'll pay for this. I swear, you'll regret the day you crossed us." As the door closed behind them, I sank into a chair, the full weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. I had exposed the truth, but at what cost? My marriage, my safety, my entire life as I knew it was now in shambles. Mr. Simmons placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Matthews, are you all right?" I looked up at him, tears blurring my vision. "I don't know," I whispered. "What happens now?" Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. Alex's threat wasn't empty, and the battle for justice and my own survival was far from over. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I took the stand. Alex and Judith glared at me from the defendant's table, their eyes burning with hatred. I swallowed hard, reminding myself why I was here. For Victor. For justice. "Mrs. Matthews," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about the document you found in your late father-in-law's safe." I took a deep breath. It was a letter addressed to me. Victor knew what Alex and Judith were up to. Suddenly, Alex's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! Hearsay!" The judge nodded. "Sustained. Mrs. Matthews, please stick to what you personally witnessed." I felt a flicker of panic. How could I tell Victor's story without his words? But then I remembered his final gift to me. "Your Honor, I have Victor's final video message. He recorded it the day before he died." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Alex's face turned ashen, while Judith gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white. As the bailiff set up the video, I caught Frank's eye in the gallery. He gave me an encouraging nod. We'd prepared for this moment, but nothing could have truly readied me for what came next. Victor's face filled the screen, his eyes tired but determined. "Laura, if you're watching this, then I'm gone, and things have probably gotten very ugly. I'm sorry for putting you in this position, but you're the only one I can trust." He went on to detail the embezzlement scheme, how he'd confronted Alex and Judith, and his fears for his own safety. "I've left everything to charity," he continued. "There's nothing left for them to fight over. The only thing of value I have is the truth, and I'm entrusting that to you, Laura." As the video ended, the courtroom was dead silent. I looked at Alex and Judith, expecting to see defeat. Instead, I saw something that chilled me to the bone: calculation. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, while this video is certainly dramatic, it proves nothing. Mr. Matthews was clearly not in his right mind at the time of recording. We have medical records." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "The defense has presented no such records." As the lawyers argued, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Detective Johnson, his face grim. "Mrs. Matthews, we need to get you out of here." Confused, I followed him out of the courtroom. In the hallway, he turned to me, his voice low. "We just got word. Judith's disappeared, and we have reason to believe she's not working alone." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "There's a larger organization involved, the embezzlement. It goes way beyond just your family's company. You're in danger, Laura." Just then, a commotion erupted from the courtroom. We rushed back in to find Alex gone, the window behind the defendant's table shattered. As chaos engulfed the room, I stood frozen. The weight of what was happening crashing down on me. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about a conspiracy bigger than I could have imagined, and I was at the center of it all. Detective Johnson grabbed my arm. "We need to get you to a safe house. Now." As we rushed out of the courthouse, my mind raced. How had things spiraled so out of control? I'd wanted justice for Victor, but now I was running for my life. In the car, I clutched Victor's journal to my chest. It was all I had left of him, of the truth. But as we sped through the city, sirens blaring behind us, I realized the truth might not be enough to save me. I looked out the window, the world blurring past. "What have I done?" I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. But there was no going back now. I was in too deep, and the only way out was through. As we pulled up to a nondescript building, Detective Johnson turned to me, his face grave. "Are you ready for this, Laura? Because from here on out, nothing will ever be the same." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next. "I'm ready," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. It was time to finish what Victor had started, no matter the cost. 6 months after the courtroom chaos, I stood at the podium, facing a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edges of the stand, but my voice remained steady. "Today, I stand before you not just as Laura Matthews, but as a voice for all those who have been silenced by greed and corruption," I began. The investigation that followed Alex and Judith's escape had uncovered a web of deceit far larger than anyone had imagined. Corporate fraud, money laundering, and connections to organized crime, it all came tumbling down like a house of cards. The Matthews Corporation, once a beacon of success, was built on lies and the exploitation of honest, hard-working people, I continued. But today we reclaim what was stolen, not just money, but trust, dignity, and justice. I saw Frank in the crowd, nodding encouragingly. He had been my rock through this ordeal, helping me navigate the complex world of corporate finance and legal battles. Victor Matthews was not just my father-in-law. He was a man of integrity who tried to stop this corruption and paid for it with his life. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed on. His final act was to entrust me with the truth, and I stand here today to honor that trust. As I spoke, I thought of the past months, the sleepless nights poring over documents, the constant fear of retribution, the moments of doubt when it all seemed too overwhelming. But I had persevered, driven by a determination I never knew I possessed. "Alex and Judith Matthews have been apprehended," I announced, a ripple of excitement passing through the crowd. "They, along with their co-conspirators, will face the full extent of the law." The news had broken just hours before. After months on the run, they had been caught trying to flee the country. It was over, truly over. "But this is not just about punishment," I continued. "It's about restoration. The Matthews Foundation, once a front for illegal activities, will be restructured. Under new leadership, it will focus on supporting victims of corporate fraud and advocating for stronger oversight in the business world. As I concluded my speech, the room erupted in applause. Reporters clamored with questions, but I stepped back, emotionally drained yet oddly exhilarated. Later that evening, I stood in Victor's old office, now mine. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, but it no longer felt crushing. Instead, it was a mantle I was ready to bear. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Detective Johnson. "Quite a speech, Mrs. Matthews," he said with a smile. "You've come a long way from that scared woman in the courtroom." I returned his smile. "I had good people supporting me, including you, Detective." He nodded, then his expression turned serious. "I have something for you. We found it in Judith's possession when we arrested her." He handed me a small, worn notebook. With trembling hands, I opened it. It was Victor's handwriting, dated entries from his final days. As I skimmed the pages, tears welled in my eyes. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew what they were planning, but he couldn't prove it. That's why he left everything to me." Detective Johnson squeezed my shoulder gently. "He chose well. You've done him proud, Laura." As he left, I sank into Victor's old chair, clutching the notebook to my chest. The journey had been long and painful, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. I looked out the window at the city skyline, the future stretching out before me. There was still so much work to do, so many wrongs to right, but for the first time in years I felt truly alive, truly purposeful. "We did it, Victor," I whispered to the empty room. "We brought them to justice, and I promise you, this is just the beginning." As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow across the office, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me, the future uncertain but full of possibility, and I was ready to face it head-on, armed with the truth and the strength I had discovered within myself. The end of one chapter, but the beginning of so much more.
Hi, my name is Susan Thompson. Where do I even start? I'm 31 years old, doing really well in my marketing career, and I thought I had a handle on all the family drama. But everything changed when my little sister, Daisy, started planning her wedding. I was there to help her create the perfect day, but soon realized that things were going to be far more complicated than I ever imagined. The shadow of our dad, Brian, loomed over everything. Ever since his divorce, he hasn't been the same. He's been struggling, sinking deeper into alcohol and making one bad decision after another. One of his worst choices, in my opinion, is his new girlfriend, Charlotte. From the moment I met her, I got bad vibes. One day, as Daisy and I were picking out flowers, she turned to me, worry etched across her face. "Susan, do you think Dad will actually show up sober?" she asked, her eyes filled with hope. "I really hope so," I replied, trying to sound reassuring. "For your sake, I do." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Hope alone didn't seem like it would be enough. As the wedding day got closer, I felt less like a maid of honor and more like a referee, constantly trying to keep the peace. My boyfriend, Jack, was amazing through all of it. He'd always try to calm me down, saying things like, "Babe, you can't control everything." I know, I'd reply, but in my heart, I couldn't stop worrying. If Dad ruined this day for Daisy, I knew I'd never forgive him. Little did I know, things were about to get even worse. About a week before the wedding, I met up with my best friend, Mandy, for coffee. She's always been the voice of reason in my life, and I needed her more than ever. "What's really going on with you and Charlotte?" she asked, giving me a knowing look that said she already sensed something was off. I leaned in, lowering my voice and glancing around as if someone could overhear. "There's just something not right about her, Mandy." The way she latched onto Dad so quickly, always whispering things to him. And get this, I overheard her talking on the phone about some big score coming up. Mandy's eyes widened. "You think she's scamming him?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out." That conversation lit a spark in me, and I couldn't let it go. I spent late nights scrolling through social media, making quiet phone calls to some of Dad's old friends, and trying to piece everything together. The more I looked, the more I felt like I was uncovering a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. The day before the wedding, Daisy and I were at the venue, making some last-minute checks, when suddenly Dad and Charlotte showed up unannounced. "Daddy!" Daisy squealed, running over to hug him. I hung back, watching closely. Charlotte's eyes darted around the room, almost as if she was sizing everything up in a calculating way. Dad, on the other hand, slurred, "My little girl, all grown up." My heart sank. He was already drunk. "Brian, darling, let's go check out the bar," Charlotte said smoothly, giving me a smug glance as they walked away together. I felt a surge of anger rise up in me, but I tried to keep it together for Daisy's sake. Daisy turned to me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Susan." I didn't let her finish. I pulled her into a hug, whispering, "Don't worry, sis. Tomorrow is about you and Matt. Nothing's going to ruin it." If only I had known how wrong I was. They say there's always a calm before the storm. Well, our storm was brewing, and it was about to hit with the force of a Category 7 hurricane. As I stood there, holding my baby sister Daisy close, I made a silent promise to myself, no matter what, I would protect her happiness. At the time, I had no idea that I'd be fighting for much more than just a perfect wedding day. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Daisy looked absolutely radiant, and for a brief moment, all the family drama seemed to disappear. Standing beside her, watching her exchange vows with Matt, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this day without any problems. I wanted so badly for Daisy to have one perfect day, but that fragile hope was shattered the moment we walked into the reception. I saw him almost immediately, Dad, standing by the bar, already drunk, with Charlotte clinging to him like a lifeline. My heart sank. "You okay?" Jack whispered, sensing my unease. "I've got to hold it together for Daisy," I muttered, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before something went terribly wrong. As the night wore on, the tension in the room became unbearable. Dad's laughter grew louder, his movements more and more sloppy. Charlotte's eyes kept scanning the room, a strange gleam in them that made my skin crawl. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it. "Susan, Dad's making a scene," Daisy whispered, her voice filled with worry. "I'll handle it," I said, trying to sound confident. I walked over to where Dad was attempting a very unsteady Macarena, stumbling and laughing like nothing was wrong. "Dad, let's get some fresh air," I suggested, trying to stay calm. "Nonsense," he slurred. "I'm celebrating my baby girl's big day." He tried to twirl but nearly fell over. Charlotte appeared at his side, tightening her grip on his arm. "Leave him alone. He's having fun," she said sharply. "This isn't about fun. It's about showing respect for Daisy on her special day," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Charlotte's eyes narrowed as she sneered, "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always trying to control everything." The argument escalated quickly. We moved to a quieter corner of the room, but our voices kept rising with each exchange. "You don't know anything about our family." I spat at her, my patience gone. "I know one thing," she hissed. "Your daddy prefers my company over yours." Something inside me snapped. "Is that before or after you drained him of his money, Charlotte?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. Her face twisted with rage, and before I could react, she lunged at me, ripping off her heeled sandal and swinging it at my head. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. I felt the sharp impact as the heel connected with my temple, pain radiating through my skull. People screamed, and chaos erupted around us. Guests shouted and scattered, chairs were overturned, and the whole scene became a blur of noise and movement. Through the mayhem, all I could focus on was Daisy. How had it come to this? I had promised to protect her happiness, but now her wedding day was turning into a nightmare. I saw Daisy's horrified face as Matt held her back. Security rushed in, quickly restraining Charlotte as she screamed obscenities at anyone who came near. It was utter chaos. I stood there, frozen, as the police arrived and led Charlotte away in handcuffs. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of Dad. He looked completely lost and broken. That was when I realized things would never be the same again. The days following the wedding were a blur: police reports, interviews, and endless sleepless nights. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Every little sound made me jump, and the image of Charlotte lunging at me with that sandal replayed in my mind over and over. Jack, my rock through all of this, held me close whenever the nightmares hit. "You're safe now, Susan," he whispered, trying to comfort me. But feeling safe seemed impossible. How could I feel safe when my own father's girlfriend had tried to attack me at my sister's wedding? How do you even begin to recover from something like that? Daisy, understandably, was a wreck when I visited her about a week after everything had happened. She couldn't even look at me. "All those months of planning," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "And for what? My wedding will always be remembered as the day someone tried to hurt my sister." "Daisy, I'm so sorry," I started, guilt weighing heavily on me. She cut me off, shaking her head. "I know it's not your fault, Susan. But still, I can't help feeling like our family is cursed or something." While Daisy was dealing with her pain, Dad was in complete denial. He called me constantly, leaving voicemails that made my blood boil. "Susan, sweetie, let's not blow this out of proportion," he'd say. "Charlotte was just upset. She didn't mean any harm." Hearing him defend her like that after everything she had done was infuriating. The final straw came when he showed up at my apartment, reeking of alcohol. I opened the door to find him swaying slightly, his eyes glassy. "Dad, you need to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But, Pumpkin, we're family, we need to stick together," he slurred, sounding pitiful. I felt something harden inside me as I looked at him. "No, Dad. We're done. I can't do this anymore." The hurt in his eyes almost made me waver, almost. But as I closed the door, I knew it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Mandy, my ever-determined best friend, had started digging into Charlotte's past. What we uncovered left me speechless. "Susan, look at this," Mandy said one night, spreading papers across my coffee table. "Charlotte's got a record, assault, fraud, you name it." I scanned the documents, feeling sick to my stomach. How did Dad not know about this? Mandy hesitated, biting her lip. "That's the thing, Susan. I think he did." The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. We found joint bank accounts, suspicious money transfers, evidence that Dad wasn't just a victim in all of this, he was an accomplice. Telling Daisy what we had discovered was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We sat together in her kitchen, the wedding gifts still sitting in the corner, untouched. "I can't believe it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could he do this to us? I don't even know him anymore." "I don't know who Dad is either," I said softly. "But we need to protect ourselves now." Daisy looked at me, her expression shifting to one of determination. "I'm with you, Susan. Always." Despite her words, the guilt weighed heavily on me. I had exposed our father's crimes, and in doing so, I might have destroyed his life. But then again, hadn't he already done that to himself? The mix of anger, confusion, and guilt was too much for me to handle alone, so I decided to seek help. That's how I found myself sitting in a therapist's office, trying to make sense of it all. "Susan, it's normal to feel conflicted," my therapist, Dr. Evans, reassured me during one of our sessions. "You've been through something traumatic. You're grieving the loss of the father you thought you knew." I stared down at my hands, feeling torn. But shouldn't I hate him after everything he's done? "There's no should when it comes to emotions," she explained kindly. "What's important is that you acknowledge how you feel and work through it." Working through it sounded easy, but it wasn't. Still, as I left Dr. Evans's office that day, I felt a small glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild something positive from the ruins of my family's past. For months after the wedding disaster, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be, happy. Despite everything that had happened, I had a strong support system. Daisy, Jack, Mandy, and I had become an unbreakable team. Our bond was stronger than ever. One night, while we were having dinner at my apartment, Daisy raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "And to family, the one we choose," I added, clinking glasses with my sister. The media was all over Charlotte's trial. It was a circus. Sitting in that courtroom, my stomach was in knots as Charlotte's true nature was revealed for everyone to see. Dad sat beside me, looking completely stunned as her history of crimes came to light. But the real shock was yet to come. Mandy and I had been working hard, gathering evidence of Dad's involvement in Charlotte's schemes. During the trial, our lawyer stood up and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we have documentation proving Brian Thompson's involvement in Miss Lang's fraudulent activities," our lawyer stated firmly. As the legal battle continued, my personal life took an unexpected turn for the better. My career was finally starting to take off. One Sunday afternoon, my boss called me into his office. "Susan, we're promoting you to Senior Marketing Director," he said with a smile. "Your resilience and creativity this past year have been outstanding." I left his office in a daze, immediately calling Jack to share the news. "Babe, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you," he exclaimed, excitement clear in his voice. Amidst all the chaos, Daisy and Matt made a beautiful decision. They decided to renew their vows. This time, it was a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard with only close friends and family. "Second time's the charm," Matt joked, making Daisy giggle as they exchanged rings again. Watching them, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We were finally healing, all of us. Then, the day of Charlotte's sentencing arrived. The courtroom was filled with tension as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. As I sat there, I reflected on how far we had come since that fateful wedding day. We had been through so much pain and betrayal, but somehow we had made it through. We were stronger, and we were moving forward. It wasn't easy, but we had found our way back to each other. The storm had passed, and we were finally finding calm again. I stood up to deliver my victim impact statement, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "The scars from that night run deep," I began, "but they've made me stronger." I looked directly at Charlotte, knowing this was my moment to reclaim my life. "I'm here today not as a victim, but as a survivor." As Charlotte was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure. It was like a long and painful chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. The real celebration, however, came a month later. Daisy, Matt, Jack, Mandy, and I gathered at my favorite restaurant to celebrate my promotion and everything we had overcome together. To Susan, Mandy raised her glass, her smile wide. "The strongest person I know." I couldn't let her finish without adding, "to all of us." I looked around at the faces of the people who had stood by me through the hardest year of my life. For proving that family isn't just about blood, but about loyalty and love. As we laughed and shared stories, I felt something shift inside me. I realized how much had changed. The past year had been like a nightmare, but in a strange way, it had also been a gift. It showed me who really mattered, it taught me how strong I could be, and it gave me the courage to cut out the negativity and toxic influences in my life. Sitting there, surrounded by real love and happiness, I knew that this was my happy ending. It wasn't perfect, and it came with its scars, but it was real, and that made it beautiful. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I was grateful for the family I had found and the strength I had discovered within myself. So, that's where my story ends. But I'm curious about your thoughts. If you were in my shoes, would you have given your father another chance after everything he did? Or would you have kept those boundaries in place, like I did? It's a tough decision, and I know many of you have faced similar struggles with toxic family members. I'd love to hear your experiences. Please share in the comments how you've handled difficult family dynamics in your own lives. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more real-life stories and discussions about navigating complicated family relationships.